SharRon, thank you so much for joining me in these decolonized work conversations that I've been having. I am so grateful. I don't even remember how we got connected, but I'm so grateful that you agreed to be in this conversation with me. And I want to start by just asking you why. Why is this? Why is this? Why did you jump on this and say, yes, I want to talk. I want to, I want to help. Tell me.
Yes, for a couple of reasons. One, I feel that it's important that our stories are told and that our stories of how we experience the workforce in the workplace, how that not only affects how we feel about ourselves, but also impacts the quality of our lives.
Yeah.
We think about it, we spend most of our time at work.
Right.
And so we have to think about what in our workspace, in our environments, our ecosystems affects us. It affects our productivity. It affects our sense of self.
Yep.
It affects our ability to self-actualize. Also expects our ability and our capacity to love ourselves. I think people need to understand that because our success and how we function at our jobs affects our overall, we things that we don't talk about, our secrets make us sick, right? And so we have to talk about these issues so that we can challenge the narrative.
Yep. So, and along those lines, so we're having weather here. I'm hoping that it's not going to cause the Wi-Fi to be weird. But anyway, so along those lines, what have you seen as some of the things that are affecting us and affecting how we show up at work and affecting our sense of well-being in the workplace?
Sure, great question. What's affecting our sense of well-being is a couple of things. One is that the constant onslaught on our humanity. And that can show up.
Let's just stop you there. Let's just stop there. Let's just take that in. The onslaught on our humanity. Like that deserves like a minute to just like, yeah. Sometimes it feels like violence. Yep.
Oh, I just lost you. Say it again.
I was saying sometimes that feels like violence. Yeah.
I think it is violence. I think it's emotional violence. I think it's spiritual violence. I think it's intellectual violence. I think there are ways that we are treated and sometimes terrorized in corporate settings, ways that we have to continuously validate our existence, validate our genius, validate our greatness, the ways that we have to continue to minimize and betray ourselves to fit into boxes and to containers to make everybody else feel comfortable with who we are. And not only is it belittling, but over time, the assimilation acts as acid on the soul. And over time, we continue to chip away at ourselves. And in a way, and it shows up in our work, but it also shows up in our bodies.
Yeah, losing our lives, but from the inside out, right? You're like you're losing yourself. So what's the link between that and this idea of decolonizing work? What does that mean to you, that phrase?
Sure. Decolonizing work is, to me, means a couple of things. One, to not center Westernized ways of learning.
Yeah.
So that we can incorporate some of the wealth of wisdom from other cultures. It also means not having a hierarchy of humanity, that we keep elevating white cisgender men. Mm-hmm. It also means looking at collaboration differently. Mm-hmm. The meaning that collaboration does not mean that some voices are valued over others. Right. It doesn't mean fake belonging. Fake belonging means that I have to be less of who I am to participate.
So I can play. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's very damaging. Mm-hmm. So when we start thinking about decolonization, we also think about how do we honor the markets that buy our products.
Yeah.
How do we not look at people as just commodities, but create a culture of compassion and caring so that we can market in a way that's meaningful and not demeaning. Mm-hmm. So there are very variety of ways in which we have to decolonize our workplaces, but we have to do that by our minds when we stop feeling like whiteness is the epitome of greatness and the standard for excellence in doing stuff in a way that is celebrated by the dominant group is not the substratum of genius.
Right.
So there are also different ways that we have to decolonize ourselves, our minds, our conditioning around our policies and practices, how we commodify our audiences. The workplace has to be dismantled. It needs to be a major paradigm shift in a cultural awakening, but also there's so much resistance to do that because people want to hold on to their power and privilege. They don't care how it exploits people, how it enslaves people, and how it extracts from people. That's dangerous, but that's unbridled capitalism, and now and that has become the norm.
And I think what the sad thing about things is that when they become the norm, it's not seen as violence. It's just the way that things are. You know, if I think about my handbag and I just throw it down on the floor in the back of my car, it's just the way things are. I am not in any way seeing that any damage is being done, even though damage is being done to my purse. And when we've learned internally the system of hierarchy of value, that gives us so much permission to not notice violence, right? Because it's just, that's what happens to handbags and to Black bodies and to, you know, whatever it is that is the issue. So how did you become a voice in any of these conversations? Like, what's your backstory and why is this something that matters to you?
Oh, great question. My backstory is how I was raised. My father, who's a minister like I am also, was part of a group called Project Equality in the late 60s and early 70s. So I grew up understanding that there were two worlds, that there were people who had a higher sense of value, perceived value than I did. So I could not learn this, that I had to address and interrogate systems. Even from a young age, my father told me the truth is not in the history books. So I had a healthy disregard for everything I learned because I knew that my voice and people who look like me, our voices were not told. So I always knew that until I felt seen and heard, that I had to have a healthy disregard for everything I learned, even in the pulpit, because I'm a minister, right? And that's part of me that I know I have to do this work, because as a minister, when people come to me down for prayer, pre-COVID days, 3 things that they came to pray about: sickness, sadness, and sabotage. The sickness and sadness were many times related to their environment and to their work culture. The sabotage is because they knew that their brilliance was being undermined and constantly exploited, but devalued at the same time. So I never gave myself permission to opt out of this conversation because I saw the damage that it does. One of the things I think that helps me being in both worlds, being in the corporate setting as well as the pulpit, I do funerals. And many times I hear that people die because they were not able to self-actualize. And it was so even though their body died, their spirit was a slow, gradual erosion. And so I see the world very differently. And that's why I think it's important to do this work. And this is important that I cannot divest myself of doing this work. Yeah. Because if I believe as a spiritual practice that Jesus is connected to justice, that's how I believe. Yeah. And I believe in liberation. I cannot do this work because whatever we are in bondage, we don't self-actualize, and we can't be the people that the world needs if I have to cut off parts of me to fit. Yeah. So I think that when we look at the world is in this crazy, chaotic space because nobody can bring their total self, their total genius. And so we are being denied all of the inventions and innovations and all the technological advancements that we need because we are cutting people off from sharing in ways that are transformative.
The problems, the issues that we face right now requires all of us to come to the table. all of what faith brings to the table under the skin. And I remember that moment when I realized, as a mom of a child with a disability, with complex needs and all the different things I had going on, I had to free up more versions of me, because I had a very thin version of me that showed up to do the things. And other aspects of me, I'd say to people, they didn't come out to play. But to handle what was in front of me, all of me had to come out to play, because that's where I got my wisdom from, my creative side, and then my sage side, and then my, all of that kind of had to come together. And I think that when we build our capacity for difference, then we actually loving difference, honoring difference, integrating difference, then we have the playground for solving some of the things that we have. So I'm loving what you're saying. So here's the thing though, how do we, like, I know you're still in a corporate space. So many times I'm having these conversations with people who are not in the corporate space anymore because it felt violent. Mm-hmm. And so you are in the corporate space and yet championing decolonization and restorative practices and so on. How are you doing that and keeping your soul preserved? Tell us.
Yes, a couple of things that I have to do, because I think that's such a great question. One, my spiritual practice, because I understand that I am on a battlefield and that I'm a warrior. And because I understand that liberation will always cost you something. And because I understand who I am in God's image, I'm not as influenced about how corporate America sees me. Now, it took 20 years of therapy to get to that point, right? And also, how do I say to myself? I have a therapist, I have a coach, I have a sister circle. There are, many of us in this in corporate America, we support each other, because nobody, if you're not in it, it's kind of hard to explain what it feels like. And sometimes even when people, coaches who used to be in it, they don't understand that racism never goes away, it mutates. So sometimes they want to tell you what they did. I'm like, sweetie, it's a different game now,
different thing. It's a different
game, because racism mutates. It's sometimes you need people who are in it to kind of help you maneuver. So I feel I'm totally supported, but also I'm older. Let me just say that I've been in the corporate space since the middle 80s. Mm-hmm. And so I know honestly that I would be higher in my career had I shut my mouth.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do that because of my spirit, my faith.
Yeah.
And so when I think about people like Martin Luther King, who used to always say that he would never lower his voice to raise his budget, I have to say, if my ancestors did that, what's my role? So they passed the baton to me, and I have to pass the baton back. But I also know, Faith, that you cannot change the system from being outside of the system. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So somebody has to stay in the system. Mm-hmm. To challenge the norms and to be a champion for those restorative practices. And since I feel like this is my version of work, mm-hmm. Right, that I have to support myself. We all are protesting somewhere.
Right. You have to know where your field is and what you need to be doing in that field. Yeah.
But my field is in the corporate space, but also in the pulpit. I still challenge and decolonize my mind from all this white religiosity. Right. From whiteness and from the patriarchal westernized whiteness that tries to tell me who I should be as God. And to me, God is a Black woman. Right. So because I believe God is in my image. I'm not saying God is not a white man, but God is made in the image of all of us. God is just as much as me as God is you. Yep. So I think because I straddle those two fences, that they inform each other, but also they fortify each other. Right. And so I'm not saying it's easy. And sometimes I have to remind myself that this is my charge to keep it a God to glorify, because I get pissed off, honestly, and I see people who are VPs that had probably the 10% or the 20% of insight and talent, but I chose to speak up. Now, sometimes I think it's good I know a lot of sisters who are C-levels that they just decided not to speak up, but it was a strategy. Right. So now they're not speaking up. So that they're up at the senior levels, but now they're opening doors.
Right,
other people.
right.
So I think we have to understand what your call is and your strategy, because we need all of the strategies. There's no one way or one absolute way to do this work. So
Right.
I'm happy for the people like, I'm out of here.
Mhm.
I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm happy for the people who are in here, who are speaking up. I'm happy for the people who are in here that are mentoring other people. I'm happy that the people who are at the C level and they're opening doors. It takes all of us. And I think that's something we have to remember, because sometimes I feel that people who stay in the corporate space are so many times villainized by our own Black people, that we are sellouts. But I'm thinking, isn't that interesting? You're calling us sellouts, but we're the ones are able to hire you. Because we are, a lot of us are making those great salaries, and we can hire the Black businesses. We can make choices as to distributors. We can make choices as into retention and policies. So everybody has a role.
Yeah.
And my role is no different, even if it looks different. And if we understand that just how we are diverse as a people, because we're not a monolith, but our roles that we play in the freedom movement may look different, because we have to attack these issues from every front: spiritually, emotionally, physically, intellectually, financially, politically.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's no room for big I's and little U's in the freedom movement.
Yeah, everybody has their role in the freedom movement. I like that. I like that. So somebody listening to us have this conversation now is in the corporate space and isn't going to leave. Like, I'm 10 years out from, retirement or whatever. And yet more and more, I'm seeing that I have access and privilege maybe that so many others don't have, because the system is just not built for equity. So by grace, by provision, by whatever means, I'm here. And I'm working through this decolonization process, and I'm realizing things about the hierarchy that's just violent and so on. What's the guidance that you would offer to them as they listen to us and think about these things, maybe consciously for the first time?
Sure. A couple of things I would say, and you're asking just profound questions, and I'm thinking you're making me think out loud. So I just want to let you know.
Absolutely, the best way.
That.
Think out, the best way.
That. One, I would want them to understand the continuum of liberation. I feel like if you don't know history, you will think that some of the things that are happening to you systemically is about yourself. So first, I think we have to understand this is myself, and this is systemic, structural, historical racism. And so just because they have those mindsets, that really doesn't have anything to do about how they perceive me. That's one thing. The second thing, in addition to this history piece, I think that it is important to find ways to fortify yourself when you stay. You cannot stay in corporate America as a change agent, or even if you be a silent change agent, because remember that you can do things very differently alone. This requires community and communion, and you must have a sanctuary. You must have a group of friends saying, you know what, those people getting on my last nerve. You must have a sanctuary. It may be a therapist to make sure that you don't ingrain and inculcate those messages in a way that renders you paralyzed. It's one thing to be close, it's another thing to be connected. So I'm connected to corporate America, but I'm not close to those pejorative messages. And so, and you can't detach by yourself, right? You need to have someone to witness who you are. That's really, really important. I think that not only do you need to know your history, you need to be supported, you also have to continue your own source, your own path of liberation, which means that start understanding that you finding ways to generate your own money. It's very empowering, and maybe I speak up because I know I can generate money.
Yeah.
But however, do that by using all the skills that you gain in the corporate setting. Sometimes I think we fight so much Oh, we have to fight so much. Sometimes to be quiet, look at all the stuff we learn. I learned how to be a leader and how to build by taking advantage of all of the learning opportunities here. I'm like, y'all thinking y'all, because it's kind of like being, what does the Bible say? Be gentle like a dove, but be sly like a snake. So I'm here and I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm tweaking, I'm practicing stuff on y'all, none of my business, right? So if you think about you're on, I love you said the playground, this is a training ground, but you have to be, so you have to do the work so you can separate the truth from tradition.
Yep.
And when you can do that, you can always follow your own conscience and you don't have to worry about the crowd, even if you're in the midst of the crowd. That's a powerful place, but you can't do that by yourself.
Yeah, no, this key of being deeply, beautifully, powerfully supported, that feels like the only way forward. Because when you're supported and connected and within community, then you have the resources. It's not just your resources. You have the resources of the collective when you're in there alone, allegedly, right? And I love this last thing one of the last things you said, which is that you have the courage to speak when you feel like, well, I can make my own money anyway. And I've seen myself in that situation so many times. I'm willing to set boundaries and I'm willing to kind of, because I'm like, even if I have my, whether side hustle or business doesn't feel like it's, doing well in the moment, I have a deep trust in my ability to make money for myself. So so then I can set the boundaries and I can really be consistent with that. Not that that's not a critique on anyone else, but I'm just reflecting on the freedom that has given me, even in spaces where that are super structured and highly corporate.
Yeah, something I want to say that I love, I just want to just stick a needle in when you said powerfully and deeply supported. I just want to stick a needle in that. Trauma makes us feel like we can't trust each other. Historical trauma makes us believe we can't trust people who look like us. That's why we have to know that history and be healing in the process to liberate ourselves from those narratives. When you are deeply and powerfully supported, that allows you to resist the onslaught. It almost like you provide
like an immune system, like as immune system.
Yes, but also it gives you an incubator where you can still try on different parts of who you are. And that part of accessing the resources of the collective, that takes a lot of healing because we don't understand that self-care is being part of a holy, healthy sanctuary. That's self-care. And if we know that having self-care means that we have to be a part of that, that's important. My grandmother said something very important. She said, never connect with people who don't know what you carry. And I wrote that and I wrote a chapter about that in one of my books. Do the people you spend the time with know what you carry? Now, the corporation might not know, but you have to have someone to witness you.
Yeah, because witnessing is important.
Yeah, you win by being witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're being bombarded, remind you who you are. And that's really critical.
Absolutely. I think witnessing feels so important in this journey that we're on, in the healing journey. I think this is a good point just to wrap up. I am really just leaning into our need for both spiritual and communal practices that support us deeply and help us know what our place in the freedom fight is and help us stay in our place in the freedom fight. And I so appreciate, your spotlighting that. Because like you said, regardless of where we are, whether inside corporate or, whether speaking or not, like our presence is resistance. Yes. And so thank you so much for spending this time with me, for having this conversation. If you're listening, SharRon's information is going to be in the show notes in different places, regardless of where you're hearing this, and definitely reach out to her. grab her books. The information will be below. And SharRon, thank you for this conversation.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you so much for honoring and understanding that as Black people, we are spiritual people. Our spirituality sustained us. And what sustained us throughout 400 years will sustain us in every aspect of our lives. So I'm glad that you're doing this work. And I hope people get healthy and healed so that they can do what they have been created to do and never settle for what they have been taught to do. So I honor you and I celebrate your gift.
Thank you.